Hello and welcome to The Signal, Workplace NL's health and safety podcast. Workplace NL is the Workers' Compensation Board in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. The focus is to promote safe and healthy workplaces, provide return-to-work programs, and offer compensation to injured workers and their dependents. This series of podcasts will provide you with the latest information on how workplaces can protect the health and safety of workers. Please enjoy the show.
Construction workers face a unique set of challenges that can take a serious toll on mental health. The construction industry is both physically and psychologically demanding. Issues such as physical hazards, job demands, job insecurity, lack of control over schedules, and the constant juggle between work and family. The industry in Newfoundland and Labrador is not immune to this issue, and there is a critical need for conversations aimed at increasing understandings of what workplaces and system partners can do to support the mental health of workers and prevent further loss of life. This episode is the first in a two-part series where we shine a light on the complex factors, limited employer and peer support, negative coping mechanisms, and deeply ingrained silence around mental health in the trades. My name is DeeAnne Feltham-Scott, OSH Educational Consultant in Prevention Services at Workplace NL. I am joined today by Tammy McCabe, Manager of Communications and Industry Relations with the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Safety Association, Mark Balsom, Quality Health, Safety and Environment Director with the Cal Group of Companies, and Corey Parsons, Trades NL. Welcome to everybody today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, DeeAnne. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have this very important conversation. So let's start with Tammy. Can you explain the background of the task force and explain why its formation was necessary?
So in 2020, the Construction Safety Association invited Jorn Gullstrup, who is the founder and CEO of Mates in Construction out of Australia, to speak at our annual health and safety conference. Several of our safety advisors have been exposed to that program through some training they had done with the Canadian Mental Health Association, the Psychological Health and Safety Advisor certification, and we're quite intrigued by the work being done in Australia with construction workers. So we brought Jorn to Newfoundland. Jorn joined us, spoke at our conference, and shortly thereafter we brought together a small group of industry stakeholders to have a conversation with Jorn to learn a little bit more about how they managed to get this program launched in Australia, what some of the opportunities were, what some of the barriers were, so that we might learn and possibly be able to recreate that here in Newfoundland. So I guess in 2020 we had a small industry stakeholder group pulled together. However, we did decide we needed a bigger mandate from the industry before we wanted to move forward with something on a larger scale. So in 2021, the Construction Safety Association hosted a 2-day virtual leadership forum on mental health and suicide in the industry. We had 4 speakers and we had over 100 industry leaders attend, be it labor leaders, senior management with construction employers, the government, all sat around the table and had some really great discussions about what was taking place. So at the end of that roundtable, one of the key takeaways from that was that we should establish a task force, ensuring that it was multi-stakeholder, that everybody was represented around the table. And so we got started in that in 2022. So the stakeholder, the Construction Industry Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Task Force, is truly a collaborative group of individuals. We have representatives from the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Safety Association, from each of the construction industry associations, the Construction Association, the Home Builders Association, and the Heavy Civil Association. We have Trades NL, numerous representatives from Trades NL on the task force. We have several employer representatives, and Mark is one of those here today. We have 2 individuals with lived experience, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and Dr. Kim Cullen with SafetyNet, the Center for Occupational Health and Safety Research at Memorial University. And we have an amazing group of people who, are all bringing their own unique perspective to this topic to engage in a discussion and explore opportunities here in the province that we can implement industry on an industry-wide basis to help raise awareness, increase literacy around mental health, and prevent suicide.
Thank you so much for that overview. So let's move over now to Corey and to Mark. So just tell me what your connection to the construction industry is and why mental health and suicide prevention matter to you. Corey, let's start with you.
Thank you, DeeAnne. Thank you for having me here this morning. First of all, I represent the organization Trades and we're an umbrella organization for 14 construction unions representing a membership of around 14,000 people. And our membership is spread right across Newfoundland and Labrador, not only urban area here in St. John's, but all the nooks and crannies of Newfoundland and Labrador where services are limited.
Absolutely.
That's where many of our members are too. And as an organization, we have a number of priorities. Business development, we're always chasing work for our membership. And we do labor relations on the big projects that we're all familiar in the province. But a high priority for all the construction unions that we represent is the health and safety of our membership. And we take that very serious, and we have for a long time. So about 10 years or so ago, we launched a program for our membership, a member and family assistance program, where we offer a number of services to our members and their families, drug and substance abuse, rehabilitation, and we do a lot of educational work as well. What we've noticed in the province, and it's not unique to Newfoundland and Labrador, across Canada and around the world, is that the construction industry, unfortunately, faces many of these challenges more so than other industries. So, as I indicated, the union leaders prioritized this year, and we're very fortunate a number of years to partner with industry associations and contractors here in the province to launch this task force. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that all of our members and all the construction men and women in Newfoundland and Labrador has the supports and necessary supports available to them.
Yeah. Well, supporting workers' mental health, it is the smart thing to do. Now more than ever, we need to keep our workers in the workplace because of the human resource challenges that we have.
There's certainly a challenge that we're facing in the construction industry,
Absolutely.
DeeAnne, and we need to do everything we can to keep our people at work, keep them healthy, and attract new people to the industry as well. That's going to be a critical part of anyone who's looking for work, is to make sure they're coming into a workplace that is supportive and has the necessary resources.
So your group as a whole are taking some very positive steps to supporting your union members' mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we discovered is the younger generation of skilled trade workers, they're looking at those support systems when deciding who their employer is going to be. It's not like when Dad started in industries that it was all about getting a paycheck at the end of the week. I think people today are a lot more cognizant of what the employer is bringing to their job offer. Pay is certainly important, will always be important, but people are looking at the other items that are important to them and their family as well. Pensions are important, but health and welfare has certainly risen within the construction industry in recent years. And part of that large conversation is the mental health support systems that are available. Is one thing to offer assistance if it's a physical injury. There's a lot of other challenges out there as well, around mental health challenges.
And you know what? There is no health without mental health, right? So Mark, can you tell us a little bit about your connection to the construction industry and why mental health and suicide prevention matter to you?
Thank you, DeeAnne, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Yes, it's very important to us. So being a large employer within the province, for us, it's one of our key objectives, right? Is getting people home each and every day, back to their families, which is the reason why we go to work in the first place, to make a living. From a mental health perspective, it's so different. So like a physical injury, you can see a broken arm, a broken leg. However, when you start talking about suicide prevention, mental health, we need employees to feel comfortable to come forward. And like I said earlier, our goal is to get people home unharmed. So from a mental health perspective is understanding at all levels within the organization, how do we support that? And with sites and like, as Corey said, from Trades and L perspective, from a small project in central Newfoundland, rural Newfoundland, to a large mega project in Bull Arm or Argentia. It becomes a little easier with the larger groups, but having a support system available to our trades to utilize to ensure that when they are having those difficult days, those days where you struggle, having a system that they can feel comfortable enough to raise those issues and concerns. So us being an employer, it's a learning curve to support that, right? I mean, it's an understanding. And I think from a passion perspective for me it was almost like an aha moment a number of years ago of the importance of this. I mean, for years, we've done investigations, we've redid procedures, we've put in new checklists, but yet the similar incident happens again. So that says we never ever achieved root cause. When many incidents happen and it appears to be a generic safety incident, but really it was a mental health underlying issue that really caused the event. I'll just give you a quick example, and this is one that sticks with me and probably drives my passion for this. An individual who connected a 600-volt switchgear in reverse, and initial thought was high risk tolerance, right? As normal, as we've heard, all of us have heard in industry that type of root cause. But after having a conversation with the worker and understanding what happened, there was issues going on within their personal life. And that morning, that person physically was at work, mentally not at work. So I think that as a construction industry is new, and understanding what that looks like, because it would be great if we'd come to work in the morning and take off all of our stresses and hang it up in our locker before we go to work. But in real life, that's not the case. And that's what drives me to be part of this wonderful group. And I think when we get to that point that when I go to work today and I can say to my supervisor, I'm not okay today. And I think that's where we need to be. And it's going to take a lot of effort to get there, but this is a huge starting point where we're to right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to get started. In order to move forward, we have to get started.
We got to start the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tammy, let's go back to you. So what do we know about suicide in the construction industry? And why are there higher rates of suicide within the industry itself?
Well, when we started this journey, DeeAnne, we did look for, relevant statistical information here in Canada, and what we found was that was lacking in terms of occupational linkages to mental health and suicide. There has, however, been a lot of study done elsewhere in the world, and this, as Corey said earlier, is not a challenge that's unique to Newfoundland. It's not a challenge that's unique to Canada. In fact, the suicide rate is 2 times higher in construction than in the general male working populations in both the U.S. and Australia. It's actually 3 times higher in the UK, and we're seeing similar in other developed nations that have industries really like ours. A recent Australian study indicated that construction workers were actually 6 times more likely to die by suicide than a workplace incident. And when I think about all of the time and energy that we invest in preventing workplace incidents, we've got a lot of work to do in preventing this. And it's not uniquely or solely a workplace issue. There's definitely there's factors, right? But it's not cut and dry. And, we recognize that. Workplace hazards, physical hazards are a lot easier to control in the workplace. And psychological hazards, sometimes, as Mark said, they're things that are happening at home that may be exacerbated at the workplace or that you can't seem to shake, and nor should you be expected to. I think, to Mark's point, gone are those days when you're expected to just leave yourself at the door when you show up for work. That's not even possible. So again, the U.S. in 2021, they actually had 6,000 construction workers die by suicide versus roughly 1,000 occupational fatalities in relation to incidents. We also know that men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women. And in an industry that is roughly 89%, male dominated, that's our demographic. We also know that 40 to 60-year-old men are one of the highest risk groups for suicide. And that's our kind of core workforce. So, we do know a lot from learnings elsewhere outside of Canada. And we also know anecdotally what we've heard and what we hear from workers on the ground, from employers. A part of that leadership roundtable, we heard some, sobering stories, to be honest with you. So, that's kind of the state or what we know. And I know there is being work done, across the country to try to get more information around mental health and suicide in the construction industry. And we're certainly moving forward. We're better now than we were prior to COVID, that's for sure. We're better now than we were 10 years ago, but we just need to keep moving this forward. In construction, and not unique to construction, we talked about stresses that, people may be under that could cause an underlying mental health issue. And, things like, the life events that we experience, whether that be financial problems, marital or relationship issues, experiencing a serious injury or illness yourself, or maybe a loved one is going through a serious injury or an illness, pending unemployment. And I always said, we're one of the industries that work our butts off to work ourselves out of a job. I mean, that's the nature of project work, right? And everybody, financial insecurity, job instability, that's a huge stressor for a lot of people. And when you think about it, that's what our industry does. Every single day is work themselves out of work. That's a huge challenge in terms of construction. Look at the rotational work that we do and being away from home for long periods of time. I mean, I know myself, I have friends whose partners work away. And when they come back after being gone for 3 weeks, it's really hard for them to integrate into the family life. They've been gone for 3 weeks and now they come back and they're kind of in the way. And if you think about having challenges, while that person is away at work, they're not there to be able to help like, you or I would be in our jobs when we're working home. So rotational work puts a lot of stress on workers. Again, I talked about project work. Lack of job security. We have, to Corey's point earlier, we have a transient workforce. They move from company to company. They move from province to province, project to project. So that's certainly a challenge in the construction industry. Long hours, right? And we talk about psychological health and safety. And one of the factors that, help, improve our mental health is autonomy over our work. Well, in the construction industry, for the best part, a lot of our workers have very little autonomy. They are doing according to the project plan. They need what they're told to do, when they're told to do it, and how they're required to do it. So, autonomy is not something that we have a huge amount of. And then we've also got the culture of drug and alcohol use in terms of coping mechanism. And, that's in many cases, and again, not unique to construction, but that's often how we manage stress or deal with stress or blow off steam. So all of those factors really kind of a recipe for disaster.
The perfect
storm. The perfect storm. That's what I'm looking for, DeeAnne. Yeah, exactly. Without the proper supports in place, it is really possible for something that maybe could have been addressed earlier, upstream, to prevent it from becoming a crisis.
Yeah.
And Tammy, if I could just jump in for a second.
You guys share your experience. You have that experience right out there in the field.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think from a culture perspective, like Corey mentioned earlier, like the larger projects, believe it or not, it's simpler. You have more resources around you. It's longer duration. Like Tammy's point a second ago, every day you work, you're working yourself closer to the end. Well, a 2 or 3 year project provides you that opportunity to build that culture piece. For some of our smaller projects, like I'll just use an example as the Cal Group, we execute in the province. You could be talking a 3-month project. Now you're trying to build that culture where an individual feels comfortable enough to talk to their supervisor, talk to someone at the site about a very deep personal issue, concern that's impacting their personal life. That's hard to do on a short duration project, right? Our goal using like the MATES program and where we're going with this task force, I think is a great opportunity for us to provide that resource, right?
Yeah.
But the culture piece is one that always, it's a passion of mine because even from a safety perspective, I mean, we're talking about mental health and suicide prevention, but it's all relevant because it's about getting people home without hurt, without harm. And it's so hard to build that culture in short duration.
I'm just going to add to what Mark and Tammy spoke about the culture in the construction industry. The construction industry is very unique to the issues before them. And Tammy done a very good job listening out some of the challenges there, and if you look at those and start compounding, we could feel very quickly why it would be an issue for a man or woman on a job site. We all know the construction industry is very physically demanding. A lot of workers work through injuries because they got to continue to work, provide for their family. And we spoke about the high pressure where they're being told what to do all the time and got to meet timelines and demands, and a financial instability that is before our members. It's not like a lot of us, I guess, are fortunate we might be in salary positions and we know what's going to be deposited into our bank account every Wednesday. Most construction workers, they only get paid for time works. If they can't show up to work for a day due to an illness, that's 8 or 10 or 12 hours they're not getting paid to bring home to their family. Personally, I've said this a number of times, that in itself the amount of pressure that it must bear down on the individual that's working, not have that financial stability for their partner and their children. Personally, I can't really comprehend how challenging that lifestyle must be from year to year. And the last piece I mentioned there, Tammy mentioned earlier about being a male-dominated industry. And in correlation with that there, males and men obviously have access to lethal means more than women, whether it's the firearms and traveling at high speeds, pills and stuff like that there. Or they could be staying in a camp, bring their prescriptions with them, so they got access to probably an inventory of medication that can be very lethal at any point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great time to talk about stigma. What role does stigma play in preventing workers from seeking the help that they need once they recognize that there is perhaps some challenges with their mental health?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that play into that stigma, DeeAnne. Certainly the cultural norms of masculinity in terms of the industry. As I said, we are a male-dominated industry, and there is that conditioning that's there that, you're the provider, you don't talk about that, you're supposed to be strong, you got to hold it together for everyone, suck it up, that kind of an attitude. And, that certainly plays into stigma, because if I say that I'm not okay, then that somehow may challenge my masculinity. For a man. But similarly, for women, I know we feel particular pressure to keep everything together too, DeeAnne, for our families and whatnot. So that is challenging. I guess the fear of judgment, what are people going to think? And I think Mark and Corey may speak a little bit to this as well in terms of, their experiences. A fear of judgment, how they may be judged by their peers, how they may be judged by their supervisors, and then what the repercussions of that judgment could be. We are getting better at education and awareness, but we focused a lot on physical hazards and physical safety in the industry for a lot of years, and we've made a lot of improvement there. But perhaps we haven't done a good enough job in terms of educating our workforce on what are some of the challenges that they may face, how to recognize when they may be struggling, and what kind of resources are out there. So that's one of the features of the program that we're looking to implement. Accessibility and structural barriers. I talked about working away and doing rotation work. If you are working away, even accessing regular counseling, if you're doing a rotation and you're on a job from, hang on, I'm going to check out, I have an office job. I can say, I'm going to go to the doctor this afternoon from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. That's not always the case in the construction industry when someone's on a project to work. So certainly that
means an hour you're not going to get paid, right?
That's right. For me, it's an hour that I can work later this evening, right? But for our workers, our construction industry, that's not the case. And then there's some structural, there's the structural issues in terms of accessibility, but then there's also what resources are available to them. So Trades NL have programs that are available to their members in terms of an EAP program, but we have a large portion of our industry who may not have access to any private resources that are there. So like everyone else, they're waiting to use the public resources if they even know how to access them, right, to begin with. So that certainly increases the stigma. And peer influence. How do we talk about mental health on the site, and what are our peers saying when someone is struggling? And so if I hear someone speaking negatively about someone who's, they're soft or they're this or they're that, then that's going to make me not want to speak up, So there's lots of things that contribute to that stigma, but hopefully we'll be able to break some of that.
Yeah, there's certainly can be a fear, stigma if you come forward with mental health issue to your employer. And we spoke very well about how your peers may perceive you, but there's a fear from an employee perspective. If you had to come forward to your employer, whether it's the supervisor, not only I guess the stigma, what others are thinking of you, then it's back to your security is at risk. Are you going to be the next person on the layoff list next Friday, or by coming forward? So certainly there's challenges, but there continue to be challenges to come forward. However, there is a shift in the culture.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that excites me. And, it's one thing being a part of the task force for the last number of years and see some of the efforts being played in the industry. And I was fortunate last 3 years to leave the city and go out to our Gencha at the Westwhite Rose project in a labour relations role there. And even over those 3 years, that's coming out of COVID. COVID may have been a pivotal time in our history, but the culture's shifting. And I think most people would agree is that the conversation around mental health, suicide prevention is lot more acceptable to have that conversation in a workplace today. Men and women are out there, they want to support their brothers and sisters in the workplace. That they're encouraging their employer to continue offering support systems available. And just back to the West White Rose project, they did a very good job. SDP, the consortium out there leading the way, I guess, in the construction industry. And back to Mark's point earlier, very accurate, is that it's easier when you kind of got a big project in a defined place with a defined workforce that you're able to do that. But unfortunately, that's the minority. Most of our job sites are small in nature and they're spread across the province. So it becomes a real challenge. But what SDP did a number of years ago, and unfortunately we did lose a number of members to suicide on that job. And the SDP implemented a wide array of supports and programs and assistance to the membership. But one example I'll speak to is Wellness Wednesday. So the Toolbox Talk every Wednesday morning had a theme of wellness, and the impact that program had in the workplace, you can never ever measure the type of impact, but I could recall clearly a number of occasions that, for any number of reasons, that the company may not have had a Wellness Wednesday on a particular Wednesday, and there's 2 or 3 workers that will call me immediately on their first break, make me aware of it, and which tells me it works. Tells the company that program
100%.
worked, and that may have been they're out once a week where there's a bit of an open conversation by the employer to talk about wellness and mental health. So there's lots of initiatives. I know a lot of our contractors have great programs as well.
What I will say is that just going out and in the next episode, we'll talk a little bit about the pilot that we ran, but going out to Argentia and doing the training pilot, when there had already been some discussions around mental health, it was really amazing to see how engaged people were in that conversation. And it truly does speak to the fact that if we start talking about it, we will shift things. And I know they made a huge difference out there in that workplace.
Very much. We talk about the pilot in part 2 of the series, but just a little more details on what Tammy's referring to there when we start doing the pilot out there. There's some always wondering, like, are you going to get participation?
Yeah.
And we had a number of sessions offered in the town hall, and the uptake was way more than we expected because it meant then that the men and women were coming off the tools out in the field to come to the town hall for this session that we're having. Tammy, correct me, but we had about 140 people participate.
Oh, I think we actually had 231 people, I think. Wow.
So that just demonstrates again that the culture is shifting.
Yeah.
People want to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And then that was the general awareness training that over 200 people participated. And then when we were going to offer the step 2, the pilot that we're doing there, we only had funding to offer 2 sessions out at that site. And the way that work site works, there's 3 shifts. We refer to A, B, and C. And then when we came out and said that the next stage of training was going to happen for shift A on a certain date, shift B on a certain date, and we left out shift C, they certainly came forward.
They were not happy.
But again, it demonstrates the shift in culture. They want to be a part of the conversation. Yeah. They want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. And I will say, we got funding to do the third session. It was great.
And that's the reason I say it seems like definitively the last couple of years, examples like that there demonstrates the shift around the stigma. I would go so far as saying prior to COVID, mention is that people still didn't feel comfortable around the conversations. Yeah. Certainly didn't want to be a part of the conversation. And the last number of years is, I would say a vast majority want to be a part of the conversation, want to be a part of the solution. And at the end of the day, either want to help themselves. Every family is dealing with this here in different ways at home. So it's not just unique out on the job sites. Yeah, they want to help themselves, help their families, and they want to be there for the brothers and sisters to help them as well.
Yeah. I mean, and that is one of the most, important parts of education is helping to, to pick away at that stigma that exists in the workplace. So it's great to see initiatives like this working, moving forward, workers asking for more education, more awareness. So,
if I could, Ian, just a little bit on that, because from a stigma perspective, it is key. And it, once again, I know it's like a reoccurring theme on the size of project, But it's so important because if you got a project of 3 or 4 people and the stigma itself is from potentially just having an issue or concern, because it's not like you're on a large project where the numbers and you become immersed in those numbers. So it's so hard. And that's where like having this task force and having a process behind the scenes for folks to be able to bring issues forward becomes so important. And the thing is, it's even in our world, like even from a GF or a supervisor, they as well, right? So one of the things we're trying to break down that stigma as an organization and others as well. We talk a lot. And one of the things we look at is how can we integrate into what we currently do as a stepping stone, right? Into that stigma.
Starting where you are.
Because there are indicators out there. We just got to learn to recognize them, right? So like most of us start off in the morning with a toolbox talk. It could be a stretch and flex. So if someone, their behavior has changed that morning, why? Right? And as a supervisor, I think it's understanding that. And because 9 out of 10, that person right now may or may not come forward. But if you notice a change as a supervisor, there's an opportunity to have that conversation, to open up that door. And that helps reduce the stigma, right? And it is tough and it's hard, but it is getting better. I know I've even seen like within our organization, and we're no different than any other construction organization in the province, some of the messaging even, as you meet with teams or do town halls, the messaging has changed. So it's more about mental health, right? It's about opening that conversation, and that helps drive the stigma down.
That concludes part 1.
In part 2, we will discuss the next steps for the Suicide Prevention Task Force.
Thank you for joining us today. Transcripts are available to use in your workplace to increase workers' knowledge in various occupational health and safety topics. Visit workplacenl.ca for more information on the services we provide to workplaces. Feel free to share the signal on social media to improve workplace health and safety everywhere. Thank you, and have a safe and healthy day.